go. Since I arrived here last year, January of 2022, we have been wending our way through various aspects of the church. We surveyed Revelation. We also looked at the other 7 churches, those other 7 churches, that is, the other churches that are represented in the New Testament, to which the Apostle Paul wrote epistles to. And we were doing this in an attempt to reflect upon our own church here in Newport Richey. In other words, as we look at all these other churches that have something written about them, we wanted to do that to reflect on our church here in Newport Richey and ask ourselves the question, who are we? What kind of a church are we? What would be our profile? If someone had to do a profile of us, like it was done of the 7 churches in Revelation, what would our profile look like? What would the pros be? What would be the cons be? What would be? What would that look like for us? What do people say about us, Port Richey Seventh-day Adventist Church? Have you ever wondered about that? What our guests say about us? What our own community thinks about us, right? What is that? You can't hear? You can't hear it? It's going in and out. Should I swap mics or? Okay, all right, keep going. All right, okay, good. You want me to start all over again from the beginning then? All right, so if an epistle were written to the Newport Richey Seventh-day Adventist Church, what would it say? And how long would it be? All right, so that's what we were doing, all right? We've even delved into the Gospel of Mark, seeking to understand and familiarize ourselves with Jesus, the teaching of Jesus. Jesus, after all, is the church, and we want to follow his example. Now, we were having a men's ministry meeting here this last week, and we brought up a story, and this is interesting because, I don't know if you know or not, but churches don't always follow the example of Jesus. Did you know that? Churches don't always follow the teaching of Jesus, and in our men's ministry meeting, we were sharing about a story of a church that had a food pantry, but it was giving food to the community, but then they were saying, we're only going to give you food if you become a member of our church. How does that sound? Now, so when I compare that with how Jesus blessed the community, right? When did Jesus put any conditions, right, on healing anybody, right, other than coming to me, right? And make gratitude and whether they All right, I'm going to switch my mic there. So I think it's important here for churches to follow the teaching of Jesus. And that's why it's important for us to be familiar with the teaching of Jesus. So that's why we've been doing this. Looking at the churches, looking at the Gospel of Mark, looking at the teachings of Jesus, hoping to follow his example. And then we segued into this book called The Ministry of Healing. And we've kind of been highlighting that and reviewing that here the last few weeks, where Ellen White cast a vision for the church in Ministry of Healing. And in Ministry of Healing, these are just some of the highlights that jumped out to me. She says we need to spend more time as a church, more time in personal ministry and personal effort. And she says if we were to spend less time sermonizing, right? And I've taken that to mean shorter sermons. And Newport Richey, this is the shortest sermon that I've ever prepared here. It is 1 page. Look at it here. It's not double-sided. It's just 1 page. So I've been putting in the work, right? I've been trying to put to practice what she's saying, right? Okay, so here it is, right? Shorter sermons so that we could spend more time in personal effort, in personal ministry. She mentions a few other things. She says the church is made for service, that is, for action, for doing things. She says we need to break up the monotony of how we've been doing things at church. And she even says that we should use church as an opportunity for training. Just do something different is what she's been sharing. And as I've been thinking about this vision for a church, personal effort, personal ministry, spending more time one-on-one, as I've been reflecting on this passage came to mind, Acts chapter 2 and verse 42. Do you have it there in your Bibles? Acts 2 and verse 42. What does it say here? And they, that is the early Christian church, and they devoted themselves, it says 4 things. They devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching. They devoted themselves to fellowship, to the breaking of bread, and to prayer. And if I could almost, I didn't put a slide up there, but if I could diagram this, I think this is very fascinating here because this came to mind. In other words, the early Christian church was devoted to that personal effort. Do you see it there? It mentions fellowship. It mentions breaking bread. It means spending time with people, eating with people, getting to know people, fellowship. The early Christian church was devoted to that. They were grounded in personal effort. They were grounded in personal ministry. And if I could draw a diagram of this, a sandwich of this verse. Right, the first thing it mentions is, we're going to do the top layer and the bottom layer of bread, right? The bottom layer of bread is apostles' teaching. Do you see that there? All right, it's going to be a sandwich diagram. I don't know if that's the thing or not. All right, they're grounded in the apostles' teaching. That is the teaching of Scripture, the teaching of Jesus. Then the next slice is fellowship, and then the next slice after that is breaking bread. You know, which they're two coins or two sides of the same coin: fellowship, personal ministry, and then the last slice that would go on top is prayer. So I don't know if you can see that, visualize that, okay? At the beginning, it's they're grounded in spirituality. Does that make sense? In the teaching of Scripture, in the teaching of the apostles, and the teaching of Jesus. On the bottom slice, they're grounded in spirituality. On the last slice, they're grounded also in authentic spirituality, that is prayer. And in between that authentic spirituality, in the middle, what do you have? Dedication to people. Dedication to human beings, dedication to one another, dedication to personal effort. Do you see it there? And I wanted to go on a tangent now about false spirituality, because sometimes there's this example of false spirituality where people get so spiritual and they get so highly or so high and so holy and they get so close to the Lord that they come to church. And they realize, because they're so holy, and they have this special knowledge and the special insight that no one else has, and they come to church and they realize, well, you know, the pastor's wrong. Church members are wrong. What we're doing at church is wrong, because they have this special insight. And then what do? Do they draw close to people? No, then they start pulling away from people, and I can't come to this church anymore because it's not holy the way I'm holy. And then they start maybe going to another church, or maybe they just stop going to church altogether. Maybe they just have home church. I think it's home church, but maybe they just start meeting by themselves because they're so holy. No, that is false spirituality. That drives a wedge and separates us between people. When we look at here in the book of Acts, authentic spirituality actually draws us closer to one another, as we see here in the book of Acts. The early Christian church, devoted, grounded in personal effort, grounded in fellowship. That is fellowship. That is that the church in the early Christian church, Acts 2:42, is a place of belonging. It's a place of belonging. It is a place. I had an elder who would always use this phrase. It's a little dated, I know, but I think if you know, you'll know where it comes from. I had an elder in Jacksonville who would tell me, I just wish church was a place where everyone knows your name. The church should be a place where you feel love. Church should be a place where you are accepted, where you are supported, where you are not judged based on who you are or how you look or how you dress or whatever it is. You're not judged. That church is a judgment-free zone. That church is a place that there is trust. Church is a place where you can come to and you can be encouraged and you can be uplifted. Not a place that you come and then you feel worse after coming there than when you first got there. Has that ever been your experience? No. Church should be a place that is uplifting and encouraging. Church is a place where you have meaningful friendships and relationships. Church is not just it's not a place where people are friendly, but it's a place where you actually have real, meaningful, authentic friendships and relationships. And so, how do we achieve this vision of a church like this? Step number one, in developing fellowship and being grounded in fellowship and being grounded, or as Ellen White says in a ministry of healing, right, more personal effort, more personal ministry, more time on one-on-one. That maybe the first step to developing fellowship, well, maybe smiling? Maybe smiling? Okay. Maybe by greeting one another. How does that sound? By greeting one another, making eye contact with one another. In fact, that's biblical. I don't know if you know how many times in the epistles the Apostle Paul says, greet one another, right? He says that over and over again. It's biblical. Greet one another. Some churches take time to greet one another during the church service. Did you know that, Making eye contact. Now, we don't go about giving holy kisses anymore. That's how they greeted back then. Today, we'll wave, right? We'll shake hands, right? We may give a hug, right? But so we greet people differently, but it's actually biblical. One of the first steps in developing fellowship is how about by greeting one another? And so I don't know if I've said this to my leaders, my board members. I don't know if I've said this or not, but I not just my leaders, not just my board members, but my church members. You need to lead out in greeting one another. And we're not just talking about the greeters that are outside. We're talking about each and every person here. If you see a guest, if you see someone that you've never seen before, or maybe you have seen someone that you've seen before, but you've never had the opportunity to speak to them, how about you greet them? How about that? The first step in trying to create a church that is devoted to fellowship and human relationships, like it says here in the book of Acts. How about you greet one another? How about you say, hi, how are you? Can you guys say those words? Why don't we say on the count of three? I always say that. 1, 2, 3. Hi, how are you? How about that one? My name is, what is it? My name is Jonathan. What's your name? Make sure that no one who comes into this building is invisible. Acknowledge one another. Make eye contact. How'd you hear about us? What brings you to our church? If they are new, show them around as a member, right? And I talk about my leaders, my board members, my church leaders, but not just church leaders. Church members, if you see someone there in the foyer, show them around. Guests don't know our building. They don't know where the restrooms are. They don't know where the fellowship hall is. They don't know where the Sabbath school classes is. Show them around. Don't leave them by themselves. Don't let them leave without someone saying goodbye. See you later. I sometimes wonder if we should be a little bit more intentional about this and maybe have our extroverts in the church. If you're an extrovert, raise your hand. If you're an extrovert, raise your hand. Okay, we have 2, 3, 4. All right, maybe our extroverts, this should be the task of our extroverts. God has given you that spiritual gift of being extroverts so that we assign people to be intentional, maybe even in the different pew sections, right? If you see someone that you don't know or see someone's coming, come up and say hi to them, right? And connect with them. How does that sound? How does that sound? Maybe being a little bit more intentional about this. If there's fellowship meal, next week, fellowship meal. If there's fellowship meal, do not allow anyone to sit by themselves. I hate seeing people sitting by themselves. I hate that. Do not allow anyone by themselves, sitting by themselves. Tell them, hey, come join us. Sit at our table. And again, continue to build that relationship. One time I've seen it, I don't know if I've seen it here or not. Got to be careful. I've seen it in other places where there's fellowship meal and all the guests are sitting at a table by themselves. How does that sound? All the guests. No, the table is full, but it's full of guests. So we can practice that next week. How about that? We can practice that next week. Another way of strengthening fellowship is not just through smiling, not just through greeting one another, but another way of strengthening fellowship is through conversation. Remember that vision for a church, ministry of healing, if more time were spent in personal effort, less time sermonizing, greater results, we would see greater results. How about another way to strengthen fellowship is through conversation. And so my extroverts raise their hands. Introverts, will you now raise your hand? No, you probably won't because you're an introvert. I am an introvert. And this here has helped me. In fact, I'm going to share with you a little bit of the secrets of the trade of a pastor. This is what I do. And so next time I have a conversation with you, then you're going to know exactly what it is that I'm doing. Now, FORT is an acronym, and it stands for various things. For example, the F stands for family or for friends. The O stands for occupation. The R stands for recreation or hobbies or interest. And the T stands for testimony. And so because I'm an introvert, I need help knowing how to start a conversation with people. And so when I meet somebody for the very first time, or when I go and I visit them in their home and I see pictures on their wall of family, I start asking questions. I say, oh, who is this? Tell me about them. Right? And I don't know if you're like me, but I love talking about my family. If you ask me about my boys, I will just start pulling out all the pictures and telling you all about my boys, right? People love talking about their family, about who they are, right? Their family, maybe friends, maybe places that they've gone. If you see different pictures, this is what I do. I just start asking questions. Oh, is this your family here? Tell me about them. Here's another segue. It comes from, this isn't related to this here, but another segue, family. So where did you grow up, and how long have you been in the area? And, these kinds of, questions that kind of just build up. So, but keep it simple, family. Occupation. Oh, so what is it that you do? What is it that you do? And I found out so many fascinating, people are fascinating. And their stories are fascinating. And there's so many amazing people that I've learned that do all kinds of amazing things. And I'm just using this template here. And I ask them, so what it is it that you do? And then they tell me about it. And I think it's so fascinating what they do. And then maybe I tell them, so what do you do for hobbies? What are your interests? What do you like doing? And they start telling me that they like to play pickleball. And I tell them that I think that is blasphemous to play pickleball. That I like to play tennis, and that I will never play pickleball in my life. I only play tennis. No, I'm just kidding about that. All right, I may get into pickleball. Maybe, I'm not sure. All right, but recreation. What is it that you like to do? What are your hobbies? What are your interests? Do you want to hang out? Oh, you like to do this? I like to do that as well. Or I know someone who likes to do that, and connect them there. And then finally, I find this so fascinating, testimony. Tell me about your faith journey. How did you become a Seventh-day Adventist? How did you become a Christian? Tell me about that journey. And I find it so fascinating. People's journey, people's testimony, how they came to faith in Jesus Christ. So again, we're going to review this here. FORT, family, friends, occupation, recreation, hobbies, interest, and testimony. All right, that's what that stands for. Again, tell me a little bit about yourself, your family. Do you live? How long have you been here? Where did you live before? Where were you raised? How did you become a Christian? Tell me about your faith journey. Tell me about being an Adventist. And as you do this, though, I encourage you to do it with curious inquiry and authenticity. Don't do this as an interrogation, right? Just curious inquiry, right? Read the situation. Sometimes people don't want to tell you where they came from, or their family, or about their circumstances, all right? So if you read the situation, let it go. You don't have to probe, right? And as you do this, do it with confidentiality. Do it safely. Make sure that what the people tell you, that that you're not sharing it as gossip, right? And it doesn't go around the rumor mill. Make sure that you're a safe person to be able to share these kinds of things with. Okay, now I was going to have you practice this right now, but we're short on time, and so we're going to practice this at another time. Is that okay with you all? All right, we're going to practice this at another time, not today, some other day. And introverts, I'm not going to tell you when it is, so that you won't decide not to come to church on that day. But we're going to practice this at some time, even here, just in our church, right? Just getting to know somebody. All right, that's it.